Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Paranormal, the New Normal. I'm your host, as always, Jeremy, here trying to make the world seem a little more normal. Does it ever happen? God, no, I fail that every week of my life, but I try. It's all matters. And, of course, I brought a guest with me to try as well, and we'll see how it goes. But my guest tonight is Beth Castrodale, a paranormal author, and we're going to get into her books in a little bit. But first things first, how you doing tonight, Beth?
Great, Jeremy. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, my pleasure. I love having authors on. It's always a good interview. But let me start it off by asking the same thing I ask everybody. What got you into the paranormal? Where did it all begin?
Yeah, so I mean, in terms of writing about the paranormal, I love doing it ever since I was a little kid. I mean, when I was a child, I would write these, try to write my own illustrated books about like haunted houses and haunted castles. And I think I was just always drawn to that. Like I always loved like creepy movies and books and shows. And I think for whatever reason, I just found it really fascinating, and that interest just kind of stayed with me. So, but that's the early, start of it, basically.
Interesting. All right, well, so the question then is, do you still like horror movies?
Yeah, I really do. I love horror movies. I love scary books. And yeah, I love anything, especially like psychological horror. I think like the real bloody, gory stuff is less of my cup of tea. But, I like, I think, well, Hereditary did have some gore in it, but I think that was a really great like psychological horror movie that I really enjoyed. Um, I think about like the other with Nicole Kidman. That was sort of like the more ghostly kind of psychological scary movie, I thought. But I'm
Oh,
a fan of any of it really.
that is one of the first horror movies I ever went and saw in theaters, and I don't think my grandparents knew what it was when they took us to see it.
Oh,
The others, I haven't watched it it came out in 2001. I'm pretty sure. And I don't think I've watched it in 23 years. But I mean, I actually, we do horror movie brackets on this show, okay, every so often. So eventually it'll come up in a bracket. I'll have to watch. I don't know. I guarantee I'm gonna watch it again because I haven't seen it since I was a kid. But it was a good movie. I did not expect the ending. It scared the crap out of me as a kid. But I was in middle school at that point, so it still scared the crap out of me. But all right, so I gotta ask this because I love asking this to people who like are horror movie fans. What was your favorite horror movie as a kid, and what's your favorite horror movie now?
oh gosh, I have so many. I'm trying to think of like my favorite horror movie as a kid. Like when I was a kid, I don't know. I watched a lot of the Hammer films. Like that from the Hammer Studios. And I love like the Vincent Price, the Fall, the House of Usher, those kind of old like vintage horror movies. I really like them. And partly because, when I was a kid, you had to it was what you could see on TV. You didn't have a lot of choice, right? But I love those anyhow. So I love those. And, it's funny, like there's so many things I can mention now, but I think like I really like the horror TV series, like the Mike Flanagan stuff. I like it because it just dives so deeply into those stories. Like I'm thinking of uh what was it? Was it Midnight Mass? The one where he delves, it's kind of like he takes us into that town. I guess it's this small New England town, and there's that what was the pastor's name? And that was just so creepy. I think Father Paul was his name. And he was just, I mean, that movie just, I'm sorry, that series just sent shivers down my spine. So I guess I kind of like the series where you can really get into the whole, deeply into the story and the characters. But
Midnight Mass. I can't say I've ever heard of that one. I'm not going to go look for that.
I might be butchering the name. It was like it has mass in it, and it was Netflix like within the last couple of years, and it's Mike Flanagan, and he did the TV series version of The Haunting of Hill House and
Oh,
The Haunting of Bly Manor.
It was Midnight Mass. You're correct.
Okay, yeah, that's it. I thought all of the Mike Flanagan stuff is really good, but for whatever reason, that one just really, really, really gave me the creeps. So
I'll have to watch it. I'm sure my wife's seen it. She watches everything that's horror based on any streaming service, so I'm sure she's seen it since it came out a few years ago. But I just haven't come across it yet. Okay, I always have 1,000 things to watch for podcasts, so I don't really get time to just browse. But
Yeah, right.
eventually, eventually, I'm sure I'll get to it. So I guess the real question here is: have you had any paranormal experiences yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I've had some creepy things happen. I mean, I think one of the most memorable things was when, when I used to live and work on Cape Cod, and I lived in this, it was a apartment attached to a house. It was probably like 50 yards from the beach. I mean, it was really nice. I mean, you could hear the ocean and
What
everything. Really
what what
nice.
what town?
Harwichport? Harwichport?
Okay, yeah. I've spent a lot of time in the Cape working, and my wife's from the South Shore, so the Cape,
Okay,
I
yes.
know the Cape. I know the Cape pretty well. I know the Cape decently well.
Yeah, no, it's as you probably know, like Harwichport is just really lovely and just really great. I love being by the ocean and the thing was is like my apartment, it was kind of weird because so keep in mind this is like May or June, it's warm weather months and it wasn't just decent weather and I came home from work and my all of the again, it was May or June, and the thermostat was turned all the way up, and all the casement windows upstairs were all open. And I thought it was really weird because my the only people who had the key to the apartment were me and my landlord. And my landlord he would always let me know when they were going to come into the apartment. And he actually said, like, he got very nicely. He was a very nice man. He said, "Do you mind not leaving your windows open? Because it was raining a little bit." And I said, I don't know how to say, but it wasn't me. But then, so I thought it was just a little quirky thing. And then, a little bit later, like maybe 2 or 3 weeks later, it happened again. Same thing, windows wide open, thermostat up, and I never really, knew what was going on with it. That was pretty much it. I mean, I had a woman that I worked with said that I can help you move if there's a spirit in there, and I can help you move it along, or whatever. And I said, I don't know. I just, I think I didn't really want to face up to it, but I don't really know what was going on. I mean, the one thing that I kind of speculated about is my landlords had a daughter that had lived there, and she died rather young. Like, I don't even know if she was around 30 or maybe a little younger than that. So I don't know if it had anything to do with that. But then that's could be all me trying to make sense of it. I really don't know what was up, but it was kind of unsettling. I'm just glad nothing kind of happened when I was alone at night or anything creepy like that. Nothing like that ever happened.
Any of the classic horror movie scenarios. Thankfully, they
Right.
didn't happen. Yeah, I mean, yeah, someone who lives in a possessed house. I don't like to say. I don't like to say haunted house. I like to say possessed house because it's not really haunted. It's just we know there's spirits here. We don't bother them. They don't bother us. That type of thing. But I mean, they're here. I've had people come in and look and investigate, and they're definitely here. I have no doubt. According to mediums I've had in the show, it's like a hangout for spirits that are traveling by too. I don't know why, but
Oh,
okay.
at your house? You at your house?
Yeah. Oh yeah,
Oh,
my house.
wow.
But I mean, since I'm a paranormal podcaster, maybe me talking about them all the time draws more in. I don't know how these physics work, but
Right.
so, I mean, as long as they're not doing anything poltergeisty or anything similar, like I have no problem with spirits, and most people I've talked to don't either. As long as it's not bad, like
Right.
possession of the house, and it's a whole nother story. That's when it gets get out, like get
Yeah.
out. But
Right.
but I mean, I don't know, it doesn't bother me at all. So you are an author of many books, but you like to write ghost stories, and is that where did you possibly like? Because I mean, you said is living there what motivated you to write ghost stories, or was there like an earlier experience, or was it just the overall interest in horror?
I think it's pretty much the overall interest in horror. Like, I love reading, scary stories and watching them and so on and so forth. But it's funny, like, I came late to the world of writing a scary book. Like, I think, like, maybe because I was intimidated, I was worried I wouldn't write a book if it was, good enough or whatever. But I wrote books on other subjects, other works of fiction that covered very different topics that weren't at all paranormal. I wrote like one book that had magical realistic elements in it, but this was the first crack at a really like spooky book, my latest book, which I should say is The Inhabitants, and it's coming out in September. But it really, um, I think it got to the feeling in me that I like the idea of writing about haunted spaces, or, the kind of places that we enter that are, by choice or by circumstance, where, things are kind of a little off kilter and spooky. And that's always fascinated me. And I thought, why don't I try to write a book along those lines? And so I set out to do it. And in my book, there, the house that the protagonist moves into was built by an architect who believed that his works could influence the mind, hopefully in beneficial ways. But the protagonist finds that it's having other effects on her, and other stuff is kind of going on. So anyhow, I just was kind of always fascinated by the idea of haunted spaces, and then I finally wrote a book that kind of got into that kind of space. So, and it was fun to write. I really enjoyed the process. It was fun.
Yeah, I mean, I see. That's the thing. You're supposed to do these things in life when you're supposed to do them. I mean, if you felt like you weren't ready to write a horror book early, it's because you weren't destined to. You were destined to do it when you were supposed to do it. I'm on this show. I'm a huge believer of fate and destiny and all that. I mean, and well, not just this show, in life in general. I believe things are supposed to happen when they're supposed to happen. Part it's a blessing and a curse to think that way, because I mean, you don't. I mean, part of my belief is you don't die till you're supposed to die. So that led to some stupid decisions in my life. But hey, I'm still here, so apparently I'm right for now. But so. All right, so I'm kind of curious. You said you wrote, and actually, it's funny you said magic realism, because that actually is I have a bracket for that we're eventually doing on this show someday down the road, of magic realism movies. But because it's paranormal adjacent enough where I can tie it into this show. But what other genres of books have you written? I mean, please. I mean, because for everybody who listens to this show, there might be one book out of all of them that really intrigues them and makes them want to read it.
Yeah, I mean, I think like my other books have maybe been in the vein of like what it kind of gets categorized as, literary fiction with a little bit of with the previous novel that I had published before this one was a little bit of suspense. And that one was basically about two half sisters who reconnected at the funeral of their father, who was a career criminal, and they end up going on a road trip to kind of deal with some unfinished business of his and get tangled up in some dangerous loose ends that he left for them. So it's kind of a road trip suspense novel. And then the novel before that is In This Ground, and it's basically set entirely in a cemetery, and the main character is this former indie rocker who basically left his band and ended up being a gravedigger, following in his father's footsteps. And he's dealing with some grief. He feels responsible for one of his band members' deaths, and he's coping with that grief and trying to see if he can return to music. And then the book before that was basically about a Depression era corset maker who flees to the countryside to kind of, she flees a big city scandal, and she kind of gets into more trouble when she leaves. So it's all, all over the map, the topics have been, but it's been really fun to, explore different topics and different characters. And a lot of times you hear the writing advice, like write what you know. And I feel like I'm more interested in kind of learning, going into different headspaces and situations that aren't really my own experience, because I find that more interesting. So,
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, hell, actually, I've been teasing on this show that I'm going to write a book eventually. Been teasing it for a few months now, and I think within the next couple of years, I probably might, if I can find the time. I mean, I got a baby on the way, so who the hell knows?
Congratulations!
Thank you, and two older ones. So who the hell knows when I'll have time to do anything? But podcasting takes enough time. But I mean, I want to write a book, just basically a nonfiction book, just based on I guess you could call it fiction, but based on my views of the paranormal world, based on everything I learned doing this show. That's gonna be the basic breakdown of it. And I mean, if we'll see, it'll come eventually, and it's I don't know what it's gonna be, but it's gonna be something. That's all I know. Yeah. I feel like I'm destined to write it, because I mean, I don't know. I've always part of me always wanted to be a writer, but I just never thought I had what it takes to do it. I never thought I could come up with interesting enough stuff. But I also agree with that, like with not writing what you know, because I don't know shit. I'll admit that.
Oh.
So, I mean, I don't. There's nothing I really know well enough that I want to write a book on it besides the paranormal. So, I mean, and I don't know a lot about the paranormal because nobody does. So that's why. I mean, it's kind of a middle ground, I guess. It's kind of stuff I know plus stuff I think and don't know. But I don't know. We'll see where it goes eventually. But did you have? Who were your favorite authors that inspired you to write? Always, always an interesting question.
Yeah, gosh, there's a lot of them. Like, Stephen King, definitely. But I would say Shirley Jackson, she's probably best known for The Haunting of Hill House, which is just, speaking of writing well about haunted spaces. I mean, she just did, that's such a phenomenal book. I really like, there's a writer, Anne River Siddons, who wrote this book, The House Next Door, which is a really great book about, you know, you always think of you always think of haunted house or creepy house stories being about old houses, but this book is about like this brand new house that goes up in this neighborhood, and the architect is really proud of it, and it's told through the point of view of the people who live next door to it, and basically everyone who moves into this house, their life goes off the rails. It's just like this house has this malevolence in it, and then it starts to turn neighbor against neighbor. It's really creepy, and it's really interestingly done, and that the architect actually comes to believe that when he created it, that something beyond his control went awry. And that's a really good book. Um, there's another book called All Things Cease to Appear, and that's a really great book too. It deals with a haunted space, but it's basically a house in the country that has a really dark history. And again, everyone who moves into it kind of gets sucked into its spell. And it's just really good. I could go on and on. I think there's just so many books I could mention, but if there's a good creepy book, I'll read it.
I mean, well, okay. Well, you mentioned the horror god himself, Stephen King, who I also am a huge fan of. So now that leads me to the question: what's your favorite Stephen King book? Because it's always interesting to hear people's opinions on Stephen King.
There's so many I could mention, but you know what? It's interesting you asked that because I just reread Carrie recently, his very first book. And
Mm-hmm.
it's such a good book. I mean, I could say a million books of his, but I just love he really builds a lot of empathy for her character. Like, you kind of forget about that. I think if you read that book years ago, as I had, and you think, oh, it's about prom night and everything goes bad and everyone gets killed. And yeah, there is that. But leading up to that, he does such a great job of building empathy with her character. Like, you see what she goes through in her high school, and then her mother is also, bullying her as well. And there's this character in the book, Susan, I think is her name, who is she feels bad for having bullied her, and she tries to be this character of empathy with her. And I really think, like, through the Susan character and the way he writes about Carrie, like, King makes us really feel for her. So when prom night comes, we totally understand where her, her telepathy, I want to say telepathic vengeance comes into play. It really makes sense. But
It, yeah, he's a master of that. I mean, in every book of his, basically, you feel bad for the character he wants you to feel bad for. I mean, in Christine, you feel bad for Arnie. Like,
yeah.
you're literally sitting there reading it, like, come on, Carr, kill those motherfuckers. like,
Yeah,
it's
no,
just
I know. Exactly.
I
Totally.
mean, and in Carrie, I side with Carrie. I would have done the same thing if I was her and I had her powers. Like, screw these people. Like, no. She did all right by me, and yeah, I mean, I started reading his books back when It Chapter One came out in 17. That got me to like finally pick up his books and start reading them. And I started at the beginning, of course, and so I think I'm up to like 93. But
Oh, wow.
then I started living with kids, and my time to read went out the window. But I mean, it is what it is, and I mean, I don't know. He makes you feel bad for certain characters in every book he writes. So I mean, but he's a master. He's a master. I could literally spend hours talking about him, but that's not why we're here. If I wanted to do a Stephen King podcast, I would, but I could, but I just don't. Man, there's enough of them out there already. But
Yeah.
he's a master. He really is, and his son's not bad either, from what I've read. But
I haven't read his son's work. I would like to. I just haven't gotten around to it yet. But
well, his son's the one who wrote the sequel to The Shining. He wrote I'm going to blank on it right now, aren't I? Yeah, I'm going to. But with Hugh McGregor, he wrote the book for the sequel to The Shining. I forget what the hell it's called now. God damn it!
yeah, I can't think of it either.
It's gonna drive me nuts. But yeah, he wrote that with his father. I mean, so they've tag teamed a lot of books to start him off. But he's good. He does a good job. That's gonna piss me off until later. I guarantee it.
Yeah, I
But,
can't think of it either. But
so, why do you think horror stories are so compelling? Why do you think they're such why do you think people are so drawn to horror? Because I mean, horror movies have such a huge following. I get more views, more listens, more everything on every episode I do that has to do with horror movies than I do with stuff that's too paranormal. When I don't get that because there's a huge paranormal fan base out in the world, but yet horror movies get more because I mean, I think because they have the paranormal fan base and they produce most of it, and they have a lot more than that as well. So I mean, I kind of get it, but it's like horror movies are just people are drawn to them. People like horror. Like, why do you think it is?
it's weird. I can only speak for myself, but like I feel like, there's something almost like I don't want to say like maybe comforting is the wrong word, but sometimes I feel like even like I gotta say, like during the pandemic, I did not want to watch happy movies. I felt like somehow like if there was a movie about horror or murders or whatever, I know it sounds weird, but it almost feels like, it's kind of like you feel like if you can confront this horror on the screen, you feel like it kind of helps you kind of cope with some of the horrors in real life, maybe in a way. And I mean, there are also there's the thrills and chills element of it for sure that, you think, I think, that, having a good scare and all that is fun. But I also think that there's something about it that I feel like maybe it's kind of rehearsal or practice for like dealing with some tough stuff in the real world. And I think of ghost stories. I think one of the ghost stories in particular, I think, for me anyhow, they kind of hold out this possibility of that, maybe something continues on after we die, and that's comforting. Like we all have lost people that we love, and we feel like maybe, when you watch a ghost story, you think, oh gosh, maybe that's, possible, or, there's something kind of from that point of view that's interesting. And so that's just my own take on it. And I'm sure anyone else might have a different answer, but that's kind of my own thoughts on it.
See, that's kind of in line with the way I feel too. Because I mean, I honestly didn't even think about it until you started answering, and I'm like, well, actually, that's right where it makes sense to me. Because I mean, I kind of wish I can go back to when I was a kid and like tell myself as a kid, like, watch horror movies, don't be scared of them, just watch them. Because I mean, I don't get. That's the reason I got into them now. Even is because I mean, I don't get the chills like anymore when I watch them. Like watching Hellraiser as a teenager, like I was on the edge of my seat, like what the fuck is this? But
Yeah.
watching it now, I'm like, good storyline. But I'm like, it doesn't like watching someone's freaking skin get ripped off their flesh doesn't even like faze me anymore. Like it's just
Right.
nowadays it's just like, well, that's better than my deal with at work. So but,
Right.
and then, I mean, okay, well, not really, but still, it's just, I mean, I don't know. I think you're right, though. It does prepare us it does make everything else that we have to deal with in real life seem so modest, seem so minimal, like compared to what, like, no matter how bad day you're having, you're not having a bad day as that protagonist in that movie. So, I mean, those poor Leatherface victims, those poor Jason victims, like, that's all you gotta say. And you're like, all right, yeah. I'm alive still, and I'm not getting chased by a giant guy with a chainsaw, so life's good right now.
Exactly. Maybe it's like the feeling if you ever have a really awful nightmare and you wake up and you feel like, oh gosh, thank God, I'm okay. The people I love are okay. That feeling of relief, like. that we all can, I think, have experienced.
Yeah, I mean, everybody's had their worst moments in life, and if you could watch things that are gonna make you feel better, I mean, I hate this. I mean, I don't. Okay, I want to phrase this right, but in my experience, everybody I know who really, really loves horror movies, it seems like their lives are not 100% together. That's the way I'm going to phrase it. There's other ways I could phrase that, but it seems like their lives are not 100% together, like there's something missing from their lives, or they did something wrong, or, I mean, there seems like there's some element in their life that's not perfect. When people who I met who don't like horror movies at all, it seems like they have their lives a lot more together. So, I mean, maybe there is a certain element that clicks in the head for certain people. I mean, I and I'm putting myself in that own category of people, so you can't come back at me and say anything about it. So just I'm saving my ass right now. But I mean, it's the way I see it. I mean, because people who I've met people who don't like horror movies at all. Like I was one of those people who didn't like horror movies at all, and my life was a little bit more together and made more sense back then. So I mean, and wasn't as stressful. So I mean, I kind of see that. I kind of am putting myself in that category because I can see myself there, and so, I mean, I don't know. That's the observation I've seen, and it kind of like lines up with the whole theory of horror movies make us see the worst in life when make us realize we're not experiencing the worst in life just yet.
Right, right. That makes sense.
I mean, and I'm gonna get off my soapbox of that right now. But so I gotta ask because you do write you love horror. You wrote a book about a ghost story. What are your own beliefs in like the afterlife, and like what are your beliefs about ghosts in real life?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I've considered my, self a pretty like skeptical person in general, but I think like there's definitely stuff. I mean, I feel like I want to be open-minded about this because I feel like so many people report experiences that are, over and over again. You hear about, people having communications with or feeling like people from, you know, um, people who've passed out of their lives are communicating with them in some way, or they have these uncanny experiences, experiences like what I've had. And I feel like there's definitely, as I've gotten older and read more, I feel like I'm definitely open to the idea that, something is going on. And I think it's really interesting. You probably have heard this, but at the University of Virginia, they actually have a division of perceptual studies where they're looking into the idea that consciousness could survive the death of the body in some way, and they're doing all kinds of research into this. And I think I'm really glad. I feel like the one thing I really would hate to see is if people would just dismiss these ideas out of hand and say it's impossible. I always like to be open minded and think, there's, you know, why don't we see where research leads us into investigating some of these things? Because I do think that over and over again, these kind of accounts are people are reporting them, and people who are pretty skeptical too, who are having these experiences. So um, I will just, kind of to summarize, I think I am definitely keeping an open mind. I think there's something to these accounts, and I think I'm glad they're getting some serious, um, you know, critical and scientific attention, basically.
First things first. Hey, Harley, thank you for watching as always. But I mean, I actually didn't know about the University of Virginia thing, so that's awesome. I mean, I knew some schools are now embracing the paranormal a little more. Actually, it's funny because when I was a junior, senior in high school, I was trying to look up places to go for college and trying to decide what I want to do in life, which amounted to nothing. I'm not doing anything really with my actually, kind of using my degrees, but not really. But I mean, I actually was looking because I was really into Monster Quest and all those shows at that point. I looked into cryptozoology as a major,
Hmm.
and there were maybe two or three schools in the United States that offered it as a major. And like when you actually went to like go online to try to show your interest in it, there wasn't even a choice for major. So
Oh,
I think one of them was in Vermont. I will say I think
okay.
one of them was in Vermont. One of them was out west somewhere, and then the other one I have no freaking idea anymore. But because I mean, I actually wanted to pursue that. I mean, I actually went for I tried going for a degree in education with a focus on biology later because I wanted to be in the biology world just to get to that level at some point. But then, dreams die, you have to work to make money, and everything dies. But it's just that. So, I mean, yeah, for people to think that there would be nothing after death is kind of idiotic in my mind because even Einstein said energy can't be destroyed.
Mhm.
So, why wouldn't there be consciousness after death? Why wouldn't there be some form of life after death? I mean, I'm not saying everybody's walking around like in full on supernatural Scooby Doo ghost form, but still, I
Right,
mean,
right.
I've talked to enough memes and psychics on the show, as all my listeners know, that there is undeniable proof in this show alone of life after death. I've heard so
Mhm.
many tales that, and I don't think anybody on my show really makes anything up ever because I'm looking at them as they're talking and I don't see it in their face. But even if a couple of them were, who knows? I ain't playing the judge. But even a couple of them were, there's still so much proof, like so many tales of people having experienced things with spirits and ghosts and other phenomenon that is, I mean, the other phenomenons and stuff I want to get into paranormal and cryptozoology about, but ghost kind of just came with the deal. But I mean, it's interesting. It really is. I mean, it's just how any skeptic nowadays could say there's not life after death. I'm like, I mean,
Yeah,
even those who just say like, oh, it's just after death, it's nothing. It's just darkness.
yeah, I think
Are
it's
you sure?
what was that?
I said, I'm like, are you sure?
Oh, yeah,
Like, I'm like, are you in the right mind when you're saying that? Like, how is that
right,
possible?
right, yeah, I know it's like in how we, I think just dismissing it out of hand is in my opinion, yeah, I don't, I wouldn't wanna do that, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, there's got to be something. I mean, I've heard many theories. I have my own theories, which I don't need to go into again because my listeners have heard them. But I to think there's nothing. That's to me that's just something else about your personality completely. If you believe that, then that's not a good thing. But hey, Nicole, thank you for sharing. Appreciate it always. Uh, but all right, well, let me before I get into future stuff, let me just well, basically from when you told us earlier about your books, seems like there's an element of sadness, of de- depression in a lot of them. It's it seems like that's an emotion that's kind of like in all your books. Is there like a certain reason you like lean that way, or do you just think it's more compelling to readers? Like, oh,
Yeah, I mean, I think there's one thing that kind of a thread that goes through my books. I think there's like an element of loss and grief, and I think, I don't know. It's interesting you pointed on that. I pointed out that I think that you know, if I had to analyze why that is, I think like maybe it's just something that we all face in some way, and I just hope that like there's an element of hope or sense of like that of coping with it. Like I think I'm hoping that the characters come across as like they're dealing with these difficult things, but that somehow they get through it, and they do so in different ways. Like in my novel about the gravedigger he's really feels guilt over his bandmate's death. He turns away from music, and part of that he associates music with the guilt. And his daughter is an aspiring musician. She's actually an aspiring drummer, and she kind of gets him back into music. And there's kind of that thing of like coping with with guilt and grief, and then kind of finding a way to deal with it. And maybe that's because of my own wish. Like I feel like I hope that people, we all, anyone who's struggling can get support and help from people, and also find something that will restore their hope, or make them feel reconnected to life and purpose and everything else. So I think maybe that's just some of this, a personal interest of mine that I work out in different ways in my stories. So but yeah, I do hope that there's some hope and sense of redemption in the stories. I hope.
I mean, well, that's I mean, it's a very good storytelling element. It always is. I mean, to go back to the king himself, I mean, look at Shawshank Redemption. The hope
Oh,
that
yeah.
the hope that story inspires is a whole another realm of amazingness. I mean, that no matter how long you're in the hole, no matter how long you're dealing with the worst thing imaginable, you whether he did or not, who the fuck knows? But whether he did or not, I mean, you eventually you find a way out. Eventually you get your prison break, and that's just, I mean, that's it's funny because that's one of my favorite Stephen King short
It's a
stories.
great book, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's a short story. It's not even really a book. I mean, well, by his measurements, of course, but I mean, because his short stories are most authors' books.
Oh,
But
that's great. Yeah, that is a story. I'm thinking too of what the stories that, they were turned into Stand By Me was one of the stories, but I can't remember the name of the story.
the
There was a
body,
story collection.
body.
Yeah, that
Uh,
was just such a great,
I
um
think it was. I think it's in the Graveyard Shift collection. I'm not sure.
yeah, I think you're right. That's a great collection. Yeah.
It is a lot of his collections he did back in the early days are all just every story in them is freaking incredible, and they've made the best movies out of most of them. Well, most of them. We won't talk about Lawnmower Man movie. God, no. But I mean, so I mean, yeah, it's I get that. I mean, hope to bring hope in a book is a huge thing. I mean, oh, I mean, it's a basis of a lot of famous books. I mean, the Harry Potter series is all about hope and all about good prevailing. So, I mean, it's a common theme, but it's just always, and there's a reason it is because people need it. People need that everything's gonna work out at the end of the day type feeling. That's what people need, and books like yours and other books that are similar are and similar motive are they do great things for people. I mean, how many people's lives have been saved by books like this? Who could say? But it's got to be a big number, I'm sure. I mean, people going home at the end of the day and just reading these books when they're down. It's just it's life. It's mood changing. It's life changing because you're not sitting there dwelling on everything you did wrong that day. You're getting lost in a world where there's actually hope. So, I mean,
Yeah.
it's kind of a it's kind of awesome. I mean, the little things like this in life really make me kind of when I think about them actually like I am now. It kind of just it brightens your view on life. But it's like there is actually a lot of things out there that are trying to help people. We just don't realize it because there's so much negativity in this world. So,
Right.
100%.
Definitely. Just even that having a way of escape, even escaping, just as you said, just kind of going into a different world and kind of getting out of your body and going to a different spot, out of your troubles, I think is great.
Yeah, I mean it is. It's to escape is a great thing, and I mean there's many ways to do that. I mean we mentioned a few of them on this show already, but it's just the fact that these things are available to us. It means there's people out there feeling the same thing. That's all it means, and they create these things to help us with that. Whether it's watching Freddy knife the shit out of some teenagers or watching some revenge films, because there's a lot of good ones like that. So I mean, there's something for everybody. There's something for everybody. We'll put it that way. We'll say that there's something for everybody, no matter what your mind and heart desire. But I mean, I don't. I mean, I like it. I personally, animal features do it for me. I like watching nature get back at man. So I'm not even like a tree hugging hippie or anything. But it's just, I like seeing nature get back at man. I like creature features. That's always been my thing. But
Yeah, they're
it's
good. Yeah, I
realistic.
like the
It's
nature ones too.
it's realistic. I think I like the fact that it's realistic, and I mean, shark movies. Oh, shark movies are my freaking. Oh, I love shark movies. But so, do you have any future books planned already that you're planning on writing that are possibly more into the paranormal element, whether it be another ghost story or extraterrestrial story or take your pick. I mean, there's a lot of different topics.
Yeah, I'm working on one now that it's story about like a fourth generation farmer who's trying to hold on to her land. She's getting her finances are in rough shape and she's getting pressures from a developer who wants to buy her property. But in the meantime, a drifter comes into town who wants to help her. And this this drifter happens to have a lot of experience farming and she decides to take this person up on it. And it turns out that this drifter is someone connected to the protagonist's past in a kind of paranormal way. So I won't give too much away, but just it basically this drifter helps the character, but she also has something that she kind of wants in return, and it goes to some unsettling places basically. Um, so yeah, so that's been fun. I'm about 2/3 of the way through writing that, so that's
In,
fun.
interesting. I like it. I like that idea. You got me intrigued now, so I might have to look out for that one. I really might. But
Oh, thanks. So, well, it's been fun. Yeah, it's definitely it's been interesting to research some farming. I mean, it's the idea. There's a farm that's in my mom's side of the family that's still there. So I have it mentally based there. But I've been doing a lot of research on just kind of small independent farmers and how they have a pretty tough go of it, you know. But
yeah, I mean it's interesting, and I gotta ask this since I said the whole thing about the movies. I mean, you lived on the Cape and you love the ocean. Did you ever think about actually writing like a shark, like a horror shark book?
I don't know. I don't know if I'd be the person. Love a good sharks, movie or book. I don't know if I could pull it off. I think I'd be too intimidated because there's been so many good ones already done. I mean, I think I remember reading Peter Benchley's, Jaws when I was a kid, and I think that scared the life out of me. I don't think I could ever do a better job than that. But
I
I'm
mean,
intrigued by it though.
if you're, I mean, if you're trying to be Jaws, and that's a, yeah, then that's, I mean, if you're trying to, but if you're, yeah, I mean, I still think there are plenty of good stories that can be written. I mean, then again, I mean, it's a hard subject to write. It's easier to put in a film because it's more of a sight thing and it's seeing the thing. If I
Yeah,
just see someone, if I'm reading a book and it says on the page, a huge black fin was coming towards them, I'm gonna be like, okay.
right,
I mean, you see it on the screen, and it's just like there's a reason I don't swim in oceans I can't see the bottom of. There's a reason,
right.
and Jaws is a huge part of that. But I mean, I'm past the generation that had it as a book first. I mean, I saw the movies when I was a kid, for God's sake, a young kid. But I mean, I grew up with my mom telling me stories about reading the book on a float in a pool and not wanting to get off the float. So it definitely had its hard elements back in the day. I know that for sure. And I don't
Yeah,
know.
it's
Like I
a good
said,
one. But I think you're right. I think there's a lot more books and movies and so forth that could be made that would be good. But I think I'm still drawn to like the land. I'm a, the land, a house or kind of a space, not maybe by the ocean, but not in the ocean. Maybe because I'm a little afraid of the ocean myself, for some of the reasons you talked about. But
I mean,
um,
I'm from the Northeast. I've been to New York oceans. I've been to Massachusetts oceans. I've been to Plymouth Beach, and I mean, I don't go into far. I don't go into the point where I can't stand because
yeah,
I just I don't I because I've seen Jaws, all of them, even the crappy third one, but I've seen all of them, and it's just the fact that like I've been to the Caribbean and those oceans, I will freaking go underneath the water and everything because I could see almost a mile freaking ahead of me if anything's coming. Like
right,
in
right.
murky northeast waters, oh God, no, I am not taking. I mean, I got a cousin that dove for years, like scuba dived, and he he straight up has been like scuba diving out of Boston, and he bumped into a huge shark in the middle of the night. The shark was sleeping, thank God, but like
Oh gosh.
he's bumped into it because he couldn't even see it. Like he's kind of
Ooh,
like
that's
backed into
horrifying.
it, and like everybody like just turned around, and started slowly backing away in the water, like
Oh
away from it. But
god.
I'm
I would just totally freak out from something like that. Yeah.
But I mean, you go scuba diving in the Atlantic Ocean, what the hell you expect to happen? I mean, you're gonna see a shark eventually.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's just I don't know. I I man, I mean, natural horror. It's my thing. But that's also because of Mr. Bigfoot, who is my favorite paranormal topic in the world. So I I know. I actually have a Bigfoot movie bracket, but we haven't gotten to it yet, and I'm dying for that day because there are so many movies about Bigfoot. I mean, and actually, living in the Northeast, I'm sure you have opinions on Bigfoot because I mean, it's rampant around here for damn sure.
Yeah, it's funny. I don't know what forever reason I don't know why I think about this, but I think about like the Pacific Northwest or something. I don't know why I think, but maybe because I saw a movie that had Bigfoot there. But um, yeah, it definitely seems to be like a interest everywhere. You know.
Well, I mean, Pacific Northwest is a bigger hotspot than the Northeast for Bigfoot, 100%, because it's way more wooded, way more just everything. I mean, it's more meant for Bigfoot. Northeast is kind of, I'd say, like a third or fourth place hotspot for Bigfoot. But I mean, I I grew up reading books about it, being around me, and I now live about 10 minutes away from a forest that's known to have Bigfoot sightings. So it's I don't know. It's just always been a Bigfoot's always been one of my favorites. Maybe it's because it's the first paranormal topic I really looked into. I really like picked up a book on and read about it. Just the idea of this undiscovered. I'm not going to say hypothetical, but it's undiscovered because it exists. It 100% freaking exists. But I mean, just the idea of this thing that exists that we is huge and we can't prove it just yet. We're close. We're very close based on what I've been hearing, but we can't prove it just yet. And but yet the government put up signs at national parks saying, "Do not feed Bigfoot. Do not go near. Do not approach Bigfoot if you see it." Like, gee, the government puts up signs for something that doesn't exist. There's something. There's the lines are not connecting there somehow. There's a little bit of a gap there. I mean, I don't know. What do you have a theory on Bigfoot? I should say, really. I was going to ask what your theory is, but I should say, do you have one?
You know, it's funny. I have to admit, like I'm like not the I'm not in the it's something I haven't looked into or anything. Like I'm, you know, I think I'm more of like a ghosty person, you know. But you know, it's interesting. I mean, are there any things that you would recommend in terms of like films or anything, or anything that you would
Ooh,
for someone who doesn't really know that much about it, or
I mean,
um,
for films that I mean, I don't really know any films. I mean, I know films about Bigfoot, of course, but none that really, I mean, there's none that really go into like a backstory for it or anything like that. It's just kind of like, they're usually just pure creature features. I mean, The Man Who Killed Hitler and then The Bigfoot is a newer, more modern one that's really good with Sam Elliott. But,
okay,
and I mean, Cry Wilderness, I mean, well, Harry and the Hendersons, I can't not mention that. But I mean, everybody knows that one. But I mean, Cry Wilderness, it came out in the early 90s or late 80s. It's a, it's a kind of a family movie, but it's cute. It's cute. It's got Bigfoot in it. So, I mean, other than that, I mean, a lot of the Bigfoot films out there are horror movies. They're just, it's kids camping somewhere and this creature is stalking and killing them. Or, I mean, they don't do Bigfoot well. They don't portray them in the light. There's a lot of good. I mean, there's a lot of good documentaries on it by like Small Town Monsters and other. They have a lot of Bigfoot documentaries, but I mean, there's a lot of good educational things about Bigfoot out there, but it's just not really entertainment movies unless you want the horror element of it, which is awesome. Don't get me wrong, I freaking love it, but there's not like a oh, we're gonna go study Bigfoot movie. Like that's not just. If there is, I've yet to see it. But I mean, oh well, Willow Creek's a found footage film about a Bigfoot. I mean, it's a very small part of it, but it's about a Bigfoot, and it's interesting. It's a Bobcat Gold
oh,
Goldsmith,
okay,
I think.
Goldthwait, Bobcat Gold.
Yeah, Bobcat Gold something. I forget how to say it, but it's one of his movies, and it's strange. It's a found footage film, which I usually freaking hate with a passion. I hate Blair Witch, but I mean this movie was actually decent, and the ending is the end. I'm not ruining shit, but the ending is pure gold. But so I mean, yeah, I mean there's a lot of documentaries out there if you want to like really learn about Bigfoot and from like a scientific approach or from like a historical approach, but for entertainment, yeah, there's there's a good 30, 40 movies, but that's maybe more, but that's mostly horror. Mostly, you can look at the covers and it's just a big hairy creature like that's bloodthirsty looking. So
Oh
it's,
gosh.
I mean, they're good movies if you like horror. I mean, a lot of them are good movies, I'm sure, but even the ones I haven't seen, I'm sure are decent. But oh, okay, I'm not gonna say that because there's so many shitty horror movies out there. But
Yeah.
all right, well, moving on from the Bigfoot topic because my listeners are used to me going into Bigfoot every freaking show. But um, what are there any tips or any advice you would give people who want to be a writer but are hesitant about it?
Yeah, I mean, I think, like, something I would just say is, like, is to try to, connect with other people who are interested in it. Like, I think one of the great things that I had early on, especially, was my writing group, and it's just a great form of support. And if you're starting to get words down and you want people to comment and give you like helpful constructive criticism, that's a great way to do it. And just like, I mean, people who are listening to this show probably already doing this, but like, just read a lot in your genre of interest, like, because that'll help feed your mind and give you ideas. And I think that that's a really good and important thing to do. And yeah, and just keep at it. I mean, I think it's hard, like a lot of, certainly true of me, and I'm sure a lot of people who are writers, that a lot of time you just have to, it's hard because people have jobs and families and commitments, and it's just sort of finding the time. And even if you can find a little bit of time each day, or maybe, a couple days a week, just block out some time and say, I'm going to spend an hour, even just a little bit of time here and there to get words down. It adds up, and it's can be a long process, but I think if you keep at it, you can kind of get the words down for sure. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, for a lot of people, that is the restraint is the time element because I mean, no, anybody who's seen a movie about writers even knows it's time consuming. It's not just you're not going to sit down for 20 hours total and put a book out. God no. I mean, you may do your first draft in 20 hours, but you got like 5 more drafts to go at least. For most authors I talk to, I mean, I know authors that write 10, 20 drafts before they actually are happy with the product. But and I mean, and everybody's different. So I mean, it's a measure of basically what you want, how you want to do it. But it's time consuming. That's the point. It's time consuming, but it's I I mean, I wrote back in school and stuff, and it was always awesome to see an idea you have in your mind come out in words. It's always amazing. And hell, I wrote a freaking play in high school that was a mix of Macbeth and Star Wars. Don't ask me how.
Oh,
I
that's
mean,
impressive.
they kind of tie into each other to begin with, but I just did a completely original story. And when we were only supposed to write like a scene or an act, but I couldn't stop writing it. I wish I still had it. I really do. I don't know what the hell happened to it, but I wish I still had it
That
somewhere.
sounds interesting. I like the combination.
Yeah, it was. I mean, and it was awesome. It was really freaking awesome. But God, I haven't had my hands on that since 2004. So, but it's amazing to see your words come to life. It really is. And once I started, I could never stop. So, I mean, I think that's the way it is for anybody who actually enjoys writing. I think it's once you start, you don't want to stop because it's just you have so many ideas going through your head once you start. I mean, you gotta get past the first chapter, and then it just flows and flows. At least from my experience. I mean, yeah, writer blocks. I think I'm not gonna say it's not, but for the most part, if it's what you like doing, it's gonna flow eventually. So it's to be creative. I mean, it's the same high podcasting gives me, for God's sake. Like it's just that creative high, like because you're making something that's your own. You're not just sitting around watching other people's stuff or reading other people's stuff. You're making something, an art that's your own, which it's my art's good. Art's great for humanity. Stop taking it out of schools, please. And that's my soapbox for that. That's my soapbox for that. But before we get going, well, actually, here's a good question. What would you recommend as a good learning tool for people who want to write? what would be a good medium you would say to learn the art if they want to actually get some kind of education before they write? Not
Yeah, I
not
mean,
that.
it's fun. It's funny. I mean, I actually didn't get an MFA or anything like that. I mean, I had a, college degree in journalism actually, but I think I think if you have there's some good books you can buy about the trade. I mean, I remember this is an old one, but I remember I read John Gardner's on becoming a novelist. I thought that was a really helpful book that helped me a lot. And yeah, just kind of I did take some workshops. Like you can actually, if you're interested, like I know in Boston we have Grub Street, which is a great it's a place where you can take classes and workshops. Some places like have the Centers for Adult Education where they'll have writing workshops that people can go to. I think those are really helpful, writing workshops. And again, I think even again, reading in your genre of interest is a really great way to learn about, different moves that writers make in writing in their genre. So those are just some ideas, but you can, I have the feeling like a lot of people can learn a lot on their own, just by, workshops and reading and that sort of thing. But taking classes is great, but if you don't have the budget for it, you can do it.
And
Definitely.
yeah, and I mean, I was going to add in there right when you started answering. I was going to add in the fact that not everybody needs like to actually go take classes or get advice. Like some people just some people prefer to on anything they do. That's just life. I mean, everybody has got different strokes like that. But and it's funny because as soon as you said writer's class, I was like, I just watched Drama from the Train, so I was thinking of the freaking writing class in that with Danny DeVito and I can't think of the other guy right now, but with Danny DeVito was freaking hilarious. But Nicole actually had a good question though. How do you overcome writer's block?
Oh yeah, that's a great question, Nicole. That one is, it's funny for me personally. It's funny if I'm in the middle of a project. I find like I just need to get away from it sometimes. Like sometimes I feel like if I try to, if I just sit there at a blank screen or, a screen where things are stalled, sometimes I need to take a break, maybe work on something else, just, go out, take a walk. And I think eventually like things kind of work out. And I figure out what I need to do. Sometimes I'll get an idea when I'm, doing the dishes or, I'm not even at the computer and I'll think, oh yeah, that's what I need to do for that scene or whatever. So I find like just getting away from it. And when I finished a project and when I'm between books, sometimes it's a little tougher because I'm like, oh, I don't know what I'm going to write next. And that feels like another kind of writer's block. And that one is tougher because I just have to kind of wait for things to percolate. But in the shorter term, I think just taking a break is the best thing to do. Absolutely. Come back with fresh eyes.
Yeah, I was gonna say when you're in between novels, that's got to be the worst. I mean, unless you're Stephen King in the '80s and '90s, just snorting away and coming up with ideas left and right.
Yeah,
but
he's amazing. I don't. I am in awe of people who have just books coming right after the other. That's amazing.
I, I mean, all his early books are very cocaine fueled, but and you could freaking tell if you read his earlier stuff compared to his later stuff, it's such a difference. But I
Uh,
I like his I don't know. I like his cocaine era. It's some of the best work came out of that era. So I think it just fueled him. Like it just fueled him and gave him these ideas. I mean, he wrote freaking it during that era. I mean, come on. Like,
oh wow, I didn't know about. Yeah, gosh, no one do coke. I'm glad he didn't.
yeah, I am
Oh,
not I am not endorsing the use of any illegal narcotics in the show. Just to put that out there, but you know, you do you. But I ain't gonna tell you how to live your life. But yeah, don't do that. And Nicole says, thanks. I like to walk away or do dishes when I then get more ideas. And actually, yeah, I should say Nicole is an author. She's finished
oh, great.
20
Oh, that's
books so far.
wonderful. That's great, Nicole.
Yeah, Nicole, I wish I could honestly say more about your books, but I don't know them all. So I mean, but from what I've seen, I like what you do. But
I'm inspired by Nicole. I'm gonna. That's great.
yeah, that's amazing. I mean, I will say I did have on the show back when I first started a couple years ago a 14-year-old girl who wrote already 8 or 7 books, and it was one of the most mind blowing things I still can't get over to this day. I mean, and she's written more since then. So I mean, she's got to be
Wow,
16 now, but she
that's
she
amazing.
she started writing when she was like 7 or 8, and like she keeps writing. It's amazing and genius of a girl, really like brilliant girl. Like I don't
Yeah,
know,
that's a special gift.
I should actually reach out and get back on the show at some point, but we'll see. And yeah, Nicole writes horror fiction and nonfiction. I knew about the horror fiction. I knew about that part, but uh, well, I do want to thank you for coming on, Beth, because it's been an amazing show to hear about your work and just to hear your advice. And we got to talk horror movies. Who the hell doesn't love that? So
Oh, well,
I
thanks. I had a lot of fun. It was fun to learn about. I'll have to just try the Bigfoot movie, the movies you recommended.
just don't go down. Just I'd stay away from Bigfoot books because there's a whole subcategory on Amazon of Bigfoot books that's kind of disturbing. But that's neither here or there. But it's a whole nother world I dove into once, and I still can't get it out of my head. But where can people find you? Where can people find your books? Just promote yourself to the fullest.
Yeah, the best way for people to find more about me and my books is bethcastrodale.com. So my name is spelled on the screen, bethcastrodale.com. You have all the information is there. So thank you for asking about that. And
Oh, of course. And for all those who are listeners and who are not watching the video, that website will be in the description, of course. So just click and go. But everybody who's been watching, thank you. Those who listen, thank you in advance. And you all know where to find me by now if you don't. God, shame. But anyway, check the outro for all the listeners and all the watchers. It's on the bottom of the screen this whole time. If you can't read, then sorry. But if you can't read, then why are you watching a show about an author? But I will be back, I believe, this weekend with a weekend special for you all. So you're welcome. And I want to thank Beth one more time for coming on, and everybody else, have a good
thanks,
night.
Jeremy. Thanks, everyone else. It was a pleasure to be here. So.
Our pleasure to have.